All right, let's dive right into this explainer. When you hear the name Albert Einstein, I'm guessing your mind jumps straight to the wild hair, maybe a chalkboard totally covered in complex math, and just the ultimate symbol of human genius, right? But today we're going to look way beyond that caricature. We are exploring the complex, sometimes contradictory, and honestly fiercely rebellious human being whose absolute willingness to question literally everything fundamentally reshaped our entire understanding of the universe.
I mean, just listen to this late-life confession from a guy who was a dedicated, lifelong pacifist. He said, "I made one great mistake in my life, when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made." Wow, it really hooks you right away, doesn't it? It just goes to show that Einstein's life wasn't some simple, straight line of mathematical triumphs. It was full of these profound, deeply human contradictions and really heavy moral burdens. To understand how he got to that heavy realization, we've got to go back to the very beginning.
Section 1. The Rebellious Patent Clerk. Now, you might be surprised to learn that the world's most famous mind wasn't exactly the perfect, eager student you'd expect.
Actually, as a kid, Einstein was a super slow talker, and he totally despised the strict, memorized everything style of his German schools. But then, this quiet little moment changed the whole game. When he was just 5 years old, stuck sick in bed, his dad gave him a simple magnetic compass. Watching that needle move, pushed around by some totally invisible force, sparked a lifelong obsession for him. He realized that something deeply hidden had to be behind things, and that simple childhood curiosity, that became the driving engine of his entire life.
And that curiosity led him down a pretty rocky, highly unconventional path to adulthood. In 1894, he essentially dropped out of his Munich high school to go join his family in Italy. Then, by 1896, his rebellious streak and his strong desire to dodge the military draft led him to completely renounce his German citizenship. He literally became stateless. Oh, and he even failed his first entrance exam to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic. Finally, in 1902, after eventually graduating but getting rejected for literally every single teaching job he applied for, he managed to score a low-level gig as an assistant examiner at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Miracle Year, 1905, also known as the Annus Mirabilis. So picture this. Working in his spare time at the patent office, a 26-year-old Einstein basically rewrites the foundational laws of physics in just a few months. It's wild. He proposed that light energy is exchanged in discrete little packets, or quanta. He gave us actual empirical evidence that atoms exist. He formulated special relativity, which proved that space and time are totally intertwined. And the big one, he gave us mass-energy equivalence. You know it as E equals mc squared, which is the fundamental basis of nuclear energy. Literally any single one of these breakthroughs would be an entire career for a normal scientist. Einstein dropped all 4 of them in 1905.
Section 3. Bending Space and Time.
Now, despite the absolute brilliance of 1905, Einstein wanted to figure out the universe's most mysterious force, gravity. For centuries, Isaac Newton's view was the undisputed heavyweight champion. Newton said gravity was an instant pulling force that just acts across space. But Einstein? He proposed this revolutionary, completely geometric concept. He realized gravity isn't a pulling force at all. Instead, massive objects, like our sun, actually warp and curve the very fabric of space-time around them. And the planets are just following those curves. It's like placing a heavy bowling ball right in the middle of a trampoline.
So how in the world did he make that leap? Well, it started with what he called his happiest thought, the equivalence principle. I want you to imagine an observer inside a free-falling box. Think of an elevator where the cable just snapped. Einstein realized that the person inside that box wouldn't be able to tell the difference between falling freely in a gravitational field or just floating around in the zero gravity of deep space. This brilliant little thought experiment was the absolute crucial stepping stone that bridged acceleration and gravity, and it led him straight to general relativity.
And that radical new theory was put to the ultimate test in 1919. During a total solar eclipse, British astronomer Arthur Eddington actually observed that starlight bent as it passed near the sun exactly, and I mean exactly, as Einstein's math had predicted. Newspapers all over the globe declared a revolution in science. And practically overnight, Einstein went from being a respected, quiet academic to an absolute global superstar and a massive media sensation. This skyrocketing fame culminated just a couple years later in 1921, which was the year he was officially awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics.
But get this, here is a brilliant illustration of just how rigid the scientific establishment was back then. That 1921 Nobel Prize,
It was actually awarded for his work on the photoelectric effect, not for relativity, not for E=mc². His revolutionary ideas on spacetime and gravity were still considered way too controversial and radical by the old guard judges in Stockholm. They played it completely safe.
Section 4. The refugee, an activist. As the 1930s rolled in, the world grew incredibly dark. The Nazis seized power in Germany and systematically started targeting Jewish academics. Knowing there was no way he could safely return home, the most famous scientist on the planet surrendered his passport and became a stateless refugee all over again. He briefly took refuge in the UK. He even met with Winston Churchill to try and get help for other Jewish scientists, before finally crossing the Atlantic to settle down permanently at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey.
Having lived through such severe persecution firsthand, Einstein just couldn't ignore the injustices he saw in his new home. He actually called racism America's worst disease, and he used his massive platform to fight it. He joined the NAACP in Princeton, corresponded with civil rights leader W.E.B. Du Bois, quietly paid the college tuition for a black student, and he even personally hosted the famous singer Marian Anderson when local hotels completely refused to give her a room. He deeply, personally understood what it meant to be a victim of discrimination.
Section 5. The final unfinished symphony. As we look at his final chapters, a really profound irony starts to emerge. The exact same man who basically sparked the quantum revolution became more and more isolated from the mainstream modern physics community that he had helped build.
And the core of that isolation really boiled down to one super famous question: does God play dice? You see, as quantum mechanics evolved in the 1920s, spearheaded by folks like Niels Bohr, the theory started suggesting that at a fundamental subatomic level, the universe is just governed by pure randomness and probability. And Einstein, he was deeply, deeply skeptical that reality was inherently random.
He pushed back hard on that idea. He stated firmly, "I am convinced that he does not throw dice." So he spent his final decades stubbornly searching for a unified field theory. Basically, he wanted a single, elegant, geometrical framework that could unite gravity and electromagnetism. He totally believed that quantum theory wasn't necessarily wrong, but rather that it was just an incomplete description of a much deeper, completely deterministic reality. It was a massive endeavor that ultimately didn't pan out, and it left him as a bit of a lone wolf in his later years. Einstein passed away in 1955 at the age of 76. But there's one final, totally bizarre twist to the story. During his autopsy, the pathologist, a guy named Thomas Harvey, secretly removed Einstein's brain without getting the family's permission. He was hoping that future neuroscience could somehow dissect and map out the biological source of his legendary intellect. But as you reflect on everything we've unpacked in this explainer today, I want you to ask yourself, can the secret to such monumental, world-changing genius truly be found hidden inside the physical anatomy of a brain? Or was the real source of his brilliance simply his relentless, rebellious willingness to question everything that everyone else just took for granted? It's definitely something to chew on. Keep questioning, everyone.